So first of all, what is an exception? So what is an exception? Exception is an event. Exception is an event which occurs during the execution of a program that interrupts the normal flow of the program's instruction. Exception is an event which occurs during the execution of a program that interrupts the normal flow of the program's instructions or normal flow of the program's execution. So when exception comes, your program execution aborts. Next is why exceptions. Why exceptions? In the traditional programming, we did not have exception handling. A programmer used to return error code whenever error used to come. Error code 1, error code 2, error code 3 for various different reasons. So why exceptions? How exceptions are better as compared to error codes? This discussion will tell us. In traditional programming, error detection, reporting and handling often lead to confusing code because programmers would use error code inside the main logic. Error code you can return as a part of errors, but how a different person can keep a track of that error code? Error code 1, what is the meaning? Error code 2, what is the meaning? So one has to go through a particular documentation to see what is error code 1. Why error code 1? What is the meaning of error code 1? What is the meaning of error code 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So in traditional programming, when exceptions were not there, error detection, reporting and handling often lead to confusing code because programmers would use error code inside the main logic. Exceptions enabled you to write main flow of your code and to deal with exceptional cases elsewhere. So your code is at one place and exceptions at another place. Second advantage of exceptions is the ability to propagate error reporting up the call stack of methods. That is, if a method does not want to handle an exception, it can propagate it to the caller and so on. We did not have this advantage in traditional programming. If a particular code doesn't want to handle that exception, that code can propagate that exception to the caller. If the caller also doesn't want to handle, that caller will propagate to its caller. That we will see in the discussion. But we have that advantage in case of exception, which we did not have in case of errors. Third advantage is because all exceptions thrown within a program are objects, the grouping or categorizing exceptions is a natural outcome of the class hierarchy. So since all exceptions are classes and we are into object-oriented programming, we have a particular hierarchy for exceptions. Some exceptions are called as checked exceptions, some exceptions are called as unchecked exceptions. They have got their parents, they have got their children, etc. So exception hierarchy is there. That is third advantage. Second advantage, we can always propagate the exception to the caller if we don't want to handle. First advantage, instead of error code, we have exceptions, proper exceptions. So file not found exception. Immediately people come to know file not found exception means we are trying to read from the file and that file is not present. Null pointer exception. We are trying to invoke a method on the reference which contains null. Array index out of bound exception. We must be accessing array element which is not existing. So we are getting array index out of bound exceptions. So instead of error code, exceptions have got these all advantages.
Sir,
Huh.
can you please explain again exception definition?
Exception?
Definition.
exception is an event. See, people call exception as error. That is wrong. That's why this definition is very important. Exception is an event which occurs during the execution of the program and that interrupts the normal flow of the program's execution. That means your program execution aborts. Clear?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So don't say exception is an error. Okay. Exception can be handled or raised, but natural. See, exception is like some objection in real life scenario. Objection. Now, some people raise the objection, whereas other people can handle that objection. One has to raise the objection, other person has to handle that objection. Like that, exception can be handled or raised. Exception can be handled or raised. How to handle exception is try and catch. This is the common technique in all programming languages. C++, Java, C#, and every language has got the same technique. Try and catch. Try and catch. So exception can be handled using try and catch block in every programming language. Now exception can be raised also. Exception can be raised also. It's the same thing where you are the person and you are raising some objection. I don't agree with this. Why these things are happening? So you raise some objection. That's the way exception can be raised. And the other person handles that objection in real life. In case of exception, one part of code raises exception and other part of code can handle that exception. So exception can be handled or raised. Now how to raise exception? Exception can be raised using throw. But who can raise the exception? Who can raise the exception? So there is one file in our folder. Exception can be raised by. Exception can be